to the Deputy Chairman for the next motion.
Thank you, Chair. This is the motion number 3.13 in the name of Darren Johnson, seconded by Ginny Jones. Can I ask Darren Johnson, Assembly Member, to promote the motion?
Thank you. Yes, briefly, the motion notes the recent report from the Housing Committee on the private rented sector, but also welcomes the work of the Let Down campaign, which has been protesting about the problems of rising private sector rents and generally making life difficult, which are generally making life difficult for many Londoners. Tenants are becoming increasingly angry at the poor deal they're forced to put up with. They are angry because private rents rose 9% in London last year, while pay rose only 2%. Too many of them are forced to move home every 6 or 12 months to avoid inflation-busting rent hikes with no protection against a market that is simply out of control. The online rent map that I produced showed that rents for a room in a flat share in the lower quartile part of the market aren't affordable to someone earning the national minimum wage in any of the London boroughs. That shows what a serious problem we have here. Many of the points in the motion echo those by the Housing Committee in our recent report, but it also supports some of the other demands of the Let Down campaign. I believe it is important for this Assembly to support Londoners who are trying to bring about positive changes in this city. I brought this motion because Let Down have raised 2 points that add to the good work of our committee. In the committee we heard that letting agents can charge over £100 for reference checks that only cost them £7, and that can be just the start of a long list of extortionate fees. Let Down call for an end to fees for tenants, bringing English policy in line with Scotland. We've also heard from tenants who have had to move because their landlord raised the rent. We can all look at the figures for rents and reflect on the impossibility of people on very low incomes finding affordable rents. Let Down therefore call for more secure tenancies and more stable rents for all tenants, whether they are poor families or young professionals, and for action to reduce rents in real terms so that lower income tenants aren't priced out of the city. So I urge you to support the Let Down campaign, as well as supporting and welcoming the recent work of the Housing Committee by supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Assembly Member Jones to second it.
Formally, Chair, but reserve the right in case the remaining Tories say anything interesting.
Right. Thank you for your indulgence. We have an amendment to the motion to be moved by Assembly Member Andrew Boff.
It's obvious from the amendment where we're attacking on this. We support the idea of better rights for renters. We think it's a good idea that there should be longer terms of longer leases available, that we think that the letting agents should be regulated better, but where we fundamentally disagree is on the question of rent control. Those people who will support rent control will feel good about those people who are currently in privately rented accommodation, but let's be in no mistake whatsoever, if you vote for rent control, you are voting for more homelessness. More rent control, more homelessness. And that's the principle which we have to be separate from the rest of the Assembly. It's the main reason for why we published a minority report. More rent control, more homelessness. And that's why we propose this amendment.
Right, thank you. This amendment requires a seconder.
Go on, Steve, go on. Second.
Assembly Member O'Connell.
Formally. Yeah.
Right, thank you. Assembly Member Duval.
I'm not going to rise in this debate, but I will in terms of some of the issues that have just been said, and I'll be very quick about it, because those same arguments that were used in this debate on housing were used when we were proposing the minimum wage. They said job losses would go. Job losses would be created by the minimum wage. Complete fallacy, not true. There is no evidence to suggest on rent regulation there will be more homelessness. In fact, what we're seeing now is people being caught at the thin end of the wedges, both across the poor as well as in terms of young professionals, in terms of what they're having to face in this. There are sound economic arguments of why sensible rent control would actually do this economy a world of good. And the recent Chancellor's statement in terms of the owner-occupation issue, I've got no issues with that, and I think that will be sensible in terms of pump priming the economy, as long as we don't go back to the bad old days that caused some of the economic collapse that we were facing then. And I just give you this figure in terms for those opposite who want to pause again and pause for a fall. Every 1% increase in rent in the private sector rents takes 130 million out of the pocket of London renters. That would go back in the economy. That would go back in the economy and stimulate some of those issues. They are Tory arguments of the past in the 80s. I remember many Tories would say put money back in people's pockets to stimulate the economy. I'm not sure where the Tories are in their economic thinking these days in terms of some of those issues. So I urge caution before people reject rent regulation completely. This is a very strong sector, a very important sector now. We all understand that the private sector renting provides in terms of our communities, and we want it to be regulated in terms of giving protection to consumers, as well as bring forward those good landlords who want to provide a decent service and no doubt make profits, sensible profits here, not rip-off profits in terms of the expense of the consumers. And also in terms of rent regulations, sensible rents. Rents are not doing us any favours at all, whether it's being subsidised by the public purse in terms of housing benefit, and that's why we're looking for reforms in terms of those issues, and we share those issues, but rents taking it away from consumers about spending in terms of the economy. There is no issue about a fair rent system, and we need to bring that back on the agenda and have a sensible debate about that. I support this motion.
Okay. Assembly Member Jones, you reserve your right to speak. Do you wish to say anything?
You.
Assembly Member Boff, would you like to sum up on the amendment?
Thank you, Chair. You know, when we do reports, we do it on the basis of listening to evidence. And I asked all those people sitting on the Housing Committee, as I did, the people giving evidence, whether or not there was a scenario of increasing rent control that either increased or kept the supply of privately rented accommodation at the same level. And all the people that we referred to could not say to me that most of those that they'd said that it would reduce supply. None of them would say it could even leave it at the same level. And if the supply reduces, that means more homelessness. It's ever so simple. And with regard to what has been said about the national minimum wage, the arguments against the national minimum wage at the start were never about increasing, that it would increase unemployment. What it was is it would stop people coming on. Well, not the ones that I ever engaged with. It was about preventing the start-ups from being able to literally start up and to provide employment. It's to the opposition to the minimum wage was about the effect that it would have on the market and the flexibility of the market in order to provide new jobs. So, I mean, I absolutely understand. And when we started on this investigation, I saw the investigation and I was talking to the officer, said that this is one where we, unusually for this Assembly, and curiously enough, we do agree on the majority of things on this Assembly. I think it was said earlier, in an earlier debate, that it's so rare that we agree. Actually, we agree on an awful lot from all parties, on an awful lot of stuff. We tend to focus on the stuff we disagree with. But when we started on this investigation, I could see that we were never going to agree on this one principle, because I want to see there to be... I mean, I am one of those people who is totally aware of the problems with regard to rent. I so couldn't afford renting, I've had to buy. And I wanted to rent in London. I can't afford it. So I am entirely aware of the problem. But the problem is not going to be solved by reducing supply, and supply will be reduced by rent controls. And that's the basis on which we propose this amendment. We know we're not going to win it, and that we will be opposing the motion on that basis.
Thank you. Assembly Member Johnson, can you sum up on...
Very, very quickly, because Assembly Member Deval dealt with many of the points very eloquently, but I would just add that trying to tackle the problem of unaffordable private sector rents whilst refusing to look at any form of rent control would be as ridiculous as trying to tackle the problem of poverty pay whilst refusing to look at a minimum wage. I think the time is right for a serious look at rent controls, as the report recommends and as tenants across London are demanding.
Right, thank you. We will have a vote now. First of all, on the amendment in the name of members Boff and O'Connell. Those in favour, please. And those against? That is lost. The motion stands as it is. We will have a vote on the motion in the name of Darren Johnson and Jenny Jones. Those in favour?
13.
Those against? And the motion is carried. I will hand the chair back to Assembly Member Johnson.
Thank